Hi, everybody, and welcome to SF DocFest for the 23rd iteration. I'm so excited to have the filmmakers joining us today from our shorts film program block about activism. Welcome, everybody. I'm Sarah Flores. I program the shorts here at SF DocFest. I'm so excited to have our filmmakers here to talk about their amazing films. I would love to kick it off by hearing from the filmmakers. Could you please tell us your name, your film, what you did on the film, and what was the genesis of this story? And I'll start off with, I'm sorry, I should have asked this before I hit record. Is it Dina or Dinah? Dina?
It's Dina. Hi. Yes, my
Welcome,
name is Dina.
Dina. I did it right.
Thank you. You did it great. My name is Dina Rudick, and I'm the director, writer, editor of Bearing Witness, A Name and a Voice. So it's about journalism, really about journalists and storytellers. But I spent 16 years, my first 16 years as a professional at the Boston Globe as a photographer. And along the way became a filmmaker and left to be a filmmaker. And then when it came up that they were seeking a story about journalism in general, I raised my hand and gave them my vision for what that would be, having worked there for so long and really people. And my my work as a filmmaker is very much rooted in my years as a journalist and with that aesthetic and that ethic. And what I wanted people to know and walk away from with my film was the sense that the media is not a conglomerate and that there's no such thing as the media, and that's just people. And that these people each have incredible reasons and huge stories behind what they do. And I felt like if people could see that, it would really start to break down this sense of that's the media and that's something separate. And instead see these storytellers in society as so incredibly necessary to the functioning of a free society, and that really there are witnesses in our protection. So this really was my love story to journalism. And
Oh, Dina, I'm sorry. Your worst fears are coming true. We got a little bit of an interruption. Did you want to try and close it out?
yeah, where did you lose me? Sorry, I'm in the middle of nowhere
Your
in
worst
Vermont.
fears about your worst fears about journalism.
Yeah, I wanted this to be a small antidote to this idea that the media is a monolith and that behind the media is just people with incredible stories of their own, and that they are there as our protectors and our witnesses. It's my love
That's
letter to
great.
journalism.
It really does shine through in your filmmaking. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Up next, I would love to welcome Randy Field and Mindy. Hello,
Hi.
welcome.
Good
Thank you.
morning. My name is Randy Field. I'm the director of Voices. It's a 27-minute doc, I think. What is it, Mindy? Something like
Yes,
that.
Oh yes, because our audience has already had the wonderful experience of watching it.
I
Yeah,
watched it.
Welcome.
I'm an independent filmmaker. I've spent years and years doing commercial and corporate stuff, worked in a bunch of areas in the Bay Area. Most recently been working in the social doc world the last 4 or 5 years. Heard this story through a friend Mindy's an old friend of mine, about a group of women, as they already seen, in their 70s, 80s, and 90s, who all had pre-Roe abortions in the 60s. And for the first time ever, telling their story. They're all living in a very large retirement community in Northern California. And they'd never told anybody these stories. They told the stories to two women who were playwrights and actresses in their own right, and they put together a play. And the play was called Voices from the Silenced.
Mm-hmm.
It was performed 5 times in 5 times in February of last year. A month
Awesome.
later,
Thank
I
you
heard
so
about
much,
the production.
Randy.
Right.
Thank
I
you.
produced
Welcome,
the play.
Mindy.
Thank you.
Yes, tell us about the community and how this story how you teamed up with Randy and brought this story to life.
I live in a 55 plus community, and I produced corporate media, corporate business meetings for 40 some odd years. So I am sort of we need somebody who knows something about theater. Ask Mindy. She can stage manage and she can do the sound and she can do all of this stuff. So I ended up producing this play, and it was a great success. However, the initial videotaping was dreadful. And then this developed with my friend Randy, and let's do a documentary, let's refilm the play, and we've done all that. And the results of the documentary is so far beyond what we ever imagined, and are so pleased. And it's been a great partnership, and we're continuing to try and get it out into the world so that message is heard, that we are entering into, we're going backwards and entering into laws from 1864. So
couldn't agree more.
we're
Such an
trying
important time to highlight this story. And
We're
I think
trying-
people definitely see that
trying to fight
reflected.
that. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. Hi, Randy McLaughlin. Welcome. I don't usually call last names because there's two Randys.
Welcome. Thank you. So I am
Tell us
not a
about
filmmaker.
your role on the phone. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not a filmmaker. I am the quote protagonist, they tell me. I was one of the lawyers in the case against the Klan. And it was frankly my first case. And I'll be frank with you, we didn't know what we were doing, but we won. So years went by, literally 40 years went by. No one had heard of this case. It was buried in Chattanooga. And they asked me to come back pre-pandemic. And I gave a speech there about the film, about the case and the women and their courage standing up to the Klan, what they had accomplished. And about maybe 6 months to a year later, I was contacted by John Bader, who's the director and one of the producers. He told me he wanted to make a documentary about this case and make sure that not only the folks in Chattanooga learned what these 5 African-American women did to beat the Klan, but how what they did resonates today. And as you see in the film, the lawsuit, the statute that we use is the Ku Klux Klan Act. That statute's now being used against the January 6th insurrectionists, and it was used to basically bankrupt the Proud Boys after January 6th. So we think it's a vital tool that can be used in the arsenal of activism.
That's so beautifully said. Randy, first off, thank you so much for your work. And thank you for joining us and being a part of this story so that we can share it with our audiences and with the world at large. Really appreciate you being here. Thanks. Hi, Ellison. Welcome. I just want to point out that I think it's really special to have the work that you're doing and having the work that Mindy and Randy F are doing here together, because we're really seeing this kind of intergenerational outcome of what happens when we legislate women's bodies, of the personal stories that are happening, and kind of seeing it at this like micro and macro level is really important. So welcome. Please introduce yourselves. Tell us your position on your project, the title, and what aside from the obvious draconian state of the world we're in made you want to tell this story.
Right. I'm Ellison Martin. I'm the co-director of Don't Mess with Texas, an abortion story. And I really did this with 2 other people, Roswell Gorson and Jolie Toberhurt. And we decided this was a very important story to tell because after all, it was the Texas abortion ban laws were very limited our bodily autonomy, and as women, we really cared about this issue, but also we saw our community also feeling really let down by like the abortion laws. Like it was just like felt like a very big defeat, and we wanted to give some hope and also document the impact that these abortion laws had. And that's why we interviewed Amanda Zarowski, who's trying to make the laws have more of exceptions. And then Wendy Davis, who's a former Texas senator. And then we try to give people a way to have actionable things to do, like voting, and have some hope for the future.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Ellison. Honestly, like hearing young people take up filmmaking and storytelling in this way, I think it can make some of us in various stages of our filmmaking journeys feel really excited about the future. I think And Dina, I'm going to bring it over to you too, right? Like journalism and activism have a relationship with one another. Storytelling that is personal and political highlights the reasons why we're fighting these fights in these moments. So Dina, I mean, obviously, I will just fully confess, like I rewatch The Newsroom on a regular basis because and The West Wing because I often want to remember that there's a potential for there to be an adult in the room, if that makes sense. Can you kind of talk about how it feels to make a film like this in a moment like this, where I think that kind of the tried and true measure of what journalism had been is kind of under attack? I think both from failures of some institutions in terms of accountability for how they present the news, but also from it being politicized and changing methods of absorbing news from newer generations. And that's a very big question, so feel free to pick and choose as you see fit.
Yeah, and I would also like to add something that has been dawning on me recently too. So your question is, how does it feel to make a film like this in this moment, to give this message that the media is not like this monolith? Hard, and a little like it feels hard, and it feels like a losing battle in some ways, because I feel like we're in this media landscape that is very difficult, because of the polarization of society is a big one, and also I think more increasingly is that the news is very bad right now, and I think people are really exhausted emotionally and are tuning out. So I think that there's this polarization and there's this exhaustion, but I was really hoping that people can still value that we need to hear the truth, and that if no one is watching and no one is witnessing, things go very sideways. And that is really how one of the pillars that falls when democracy falls. So I felt like both urgent in, how does it feel to make a film like this? It felt very urgent and also hard. And also right now, I'm not in journalism anymore, but watching it from the outside, just feeling a little dismayed because the news is so bad and people are so exhausted. So I'm hoping that bringing some humanity to the idea of the media will soften people a bit and get people to see how necessary it is, and like, what if no one witnessed their lives? So I feel like it felt very urgent to me, and I'm also dismayed at the state of the media at the moment.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the work that you're doing, because I think it's just so important that we highlight all of these branches of the way that we think about our civil liberties and the way that the world is operating in this moment. I do really appreciate your story.
Yeah, I just would love to make one more quote, is that like Evan, a person in our film, is an amazing writer. She said, if you can write a story and make a person real, then people can't turn away. I feel like if we can get very specific about the issues and make it fixed to a person instead of make it just a generalization, suddenly we can care. And I think that's the work of all of the filmmakers everywhere. Every storyteller does that. And that is the work of journalists. So.
It's beautiful. Thank you so much. Mindy, I would love to come back to you also, because I know you might have to leave us in just a moment. But I think what Dina said is actually a perfect segue into the power of voices, right? Like this, what this project was able to do, right, both in terms of the play and the film, is make that very personal connection to what the consequences are of this litigation coming back. Could you talk about what it was like working with this particular group, in terms of having everyone be at a place where they're comfortable to share these stories, and then what that process was like to bring in Randy? And then we'll toss it over to Randy to talk a little bit more about his approach to the filmmaking.
It was extraordinary. I mean, we did have a woman who was in her 90s, and her story is portrayed in the play. It's discussed in the show, but that and a lot of these women, two of the women who were performers told one told her own story, somebody else told another woman's story, that she thought she had a friend perform an abortion, and what she thought was a friend, it didn't work, they did it again, and afterwards he raped her. So yeah, it is one of the most devastating portions of the documentary, because in the doc she is telling her story, and that even when there's just terror in every aspect of it and every emotion of it, of they've never told, and I never talked about mine, but I that was okay. But I wasn't able to tell anybody. I wasn't able to tell my family. And you carry that with you. But there is also an overwhelming sense of guilt for a vast number of these women. So, and Randy shows every aspect of this, and he did an amazing job.
Thank you so much, Mindy. And Randy F, going back to my schoolyard naming system. You're working with the subjects in such a vulnerable space. Can you talk about what your approach was as a filmmaker to help them feel comfortable to tell these stories on camera?
Well, when we started, I've interviewed thousands of people over the years from all kinds of projects. But in this situation, because I was very sensitive to the fact that, I felt like, why am I telling this story? I'm not a woman, I'm a man. I mean, the first set of interviews that we did, I told Mindy, I said, Mindy hasn't done this type of work before, but I said, you interview them. I'll be standing behind, I'll be directing the cameras and interjecting things if things, to help the interview, but you're the face, I'm not the face. And
they all knew me.
Yeah. So that worked great. So Mindy is a friend of everybody. And so I could just, as a filmmaker, I could see where the stories were. And after the first day of filming, the first 8 women, I mean, I'm used to situations where we interviewed a dozen people during a day, and maybe 3 or 4 are really dynamic, 2 or 3 are okay, and 2 or 3 you want to put a mirror under their nose to see if it's fogging up, to see if they're still with us. But in this situation, everyone was incredible. The stories were unbelievable. And at that point, I realized we have a movie here. And then we got into it farther and farther and farther. But it was just craft. I mean, for me, I'm a filmmaker, and that's what I do. So I could find out the story, and I could kind of separate myself emotionally, because those weren't my experiences, but I could definitely know how to tell it. So I almost considered myself more of a technician in terms of putting it together.
He did all
lovely.
the editing.
Thank you so much.
He did all the
there's a very, very humble way of approaching it, but thank you so much, Randy, and thank you, Mindy. Randy McLaughlin, I would love to come back to you. And really just talk about, I guess, in a couple ways, right? Like the work that you have spent your entire career doing is so important. I'm curious what it is like to work with a filmmaker in portraying that work, right? Like this is something that has taken decades of study, work, application, and then to have a filmmaker come in and condense a lot of that into 20 minutes or 30 minutes must be a complex process. Like what was your level of involvement with John? How did you meet John? And what did it feel like for you having this story be told in this way?
Well, in terms of my level of involvement, I spent a lot of time with John. They did, I mean, a lot of what we did with him didn't make it to the film because it's only 37 minutes. But they filmed me at Pace Law School, at my office in Manhattan. I came back to Chattanooga and did a walkabout. So we were there with him every step of the way, figuring out what to do. But what I'll say is, as a lawyer, having done this work, and never really having worked with a filmmaker like this and on this intimate level, was something that was literally my baby. I mean, it was my very first case. It was scary. I'll be frank with you. You have to have a lot of trust, and that's what developed between the two of us, a trust in relationship. And my wife, who's also my partner, she said to me, I've never seen you, because you've seen the film many times now, I've never seen you so open in terms of honest coming forward with how you felt about things. I said, well, that's because I felt really comfortable with him when he was interviewing me, and I trusted him. And I'm really happy to see that the trust paid off, because I think, frankly, the story of the women is remarkable, and the fact that it's unknown is equally remarkable.
I think that there's a really special ability of film to kind of canonize a movement. And I think that's what I love so much about what comes through in the filmmaking process in this film in particular, because you get to see how all of these elements come together in a way that those of us that aren't necessarily following every legal case can see the human impact as well as the impact on policies and laws moving forward. And hopefully, I think we're going to need it, as I think a lot of organizations that are based out of hate are really trying to find legal loopholes to get away with causing serious harm to people. So I really appreciate having you here, Andy.
Thank you.
Ellison, hello.
Hello.
As in all filmmaking is so collaborative, but it seemed like you had a pretty robust team of co-directors and producers that you're able to work with to bring the story to light. And not only that, you're activating very specific communities that are pretty large and enraged in this moment. So I would love to hear you talk about what it was like working with your other filmmaking collaborators and how you as a team approached the way that you're going to tell your story and the kinds of subjects that you selected.
Well, I've done a lot of collaborative projects before, but this was the kind of the first collaborative project we were like all in sync. We had the same kind of motivation and wanting to tell a story of like hope and wanting to have a story that encompasses many different areas of the subject, which is a big task. But when it comes to finding our interviewees, it was mostly my connections. My family works in politics, so I was able to use those connections to meet with Wendy Davis, and I also found Amanda Zarowski just by DMing her on Instagram, because it was just, and she was like, "Oh my God, this is a great idea," and she was very happy to join us. But we we kind of divided up the work, where I was mostly in charge of figuring out, trying to get people to join and be able to get on camera, and my other co-directors are in charge of getting the equipment ready. And then during production, we all kind of took turns like leading during the interview process. And then at editing, we kind of just sat in a room together on the same computer and went through each interview, kind of talking about what we wanted to have and what we didn't want to have, and figure out like a straight line through. It was just a 3-person team doing this documentary. We didn't have any other people, but we managed to make it work.
That's so awesome. I'm so glad that you all found each other and had such a great experience of working with one another, because sometimes filmmaking can be known to be a bit egotistical. So I love to see when folks are able to come together and really work for the collective good. And can't wait to see what you come up with next, Ellison.
Thank you.
Are you going to pursue filmmaking further?
Yeah. For those who don't know, I'm in high school, so it was just like a bunch of high schoolers doing this, but like, it's definitely, this experience definitely motivated me to want to continue pursuing it. And as I continue to look at colleges, it's definitely what I'm thinking about.
That's amazing. I can't wait to see what happens. Stick with it, please.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, folks, that's all the time we have for our Q&A. Thank you so much for sharing these important stories and joining us today to talk about them with our audience. Here's hoping that films like this can help to reshape what feels like sometimes kind of a broken world. So I really appreciate having you here.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.